Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 10th YouTube session of the 11th fall edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. My name is Anusha Kandasivam. I'm your moderator for this session. Through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 17 award-winning and best-selling authors to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking. Now, I'll be telling you about the Read for Pixels fundraiser. We have lots and lots of exclusive author goodies a little bit later. But meanwhile, if you want to find out about the Pixel Project and the work we do, visit www.thepixelproject.net. So today's special guest is the amazing author, Eden Royce. Hello, Eden.
Hello. Hi, Anusha. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to give everybody a little, very short bio about Eden. So Eden is a Shirley Jackson Award winner and a Bram Stoker Award nominee for her adult fiction. Her novels for young readers have won multiple awards, including the Ignite, the Bram Stoker, and the Walter Dean Myers Honor. And apart from joining today's Read for Pixels live stream session, Eden has also very generously donated some super exclusive goodies to the stash of author treats we have up as perks for donors on our Rally Up fundraising page. And I'm going to tell you what they are right now. Okay, so goodie number 1 is a special bundle of signed and personalized first edition hardcovers from Eden, and it comprises Root Magic, Conjure Island, and the Creepening of Dogwood House. There they are. Those are the three. So signed and personalized first edition hardcovers. You get all of them in this bundle. So goodie number 2, bundle number 3 is Eden Royce Psychopomp and Circumstance bundle, which contains one signed and personalized advanced review copy that's an arc of Psychopomp and Circumstance, plus one personalized handwritten letter from the main character Fee, and it could be scented and sealed with wax if you request it. So that's really cool. And all of this amazing swag is up on our Rally Up fundraising page. And the link is going to go up in the chat box very soon. So go up there and check out all of the swag that we have. We have raised $3,735 so far to a $5,000 goal. Please do give generously before the fundraiser ends in October. All funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. And before we get on with the session, I want to tell you, the audience, that you can ask Eden questions live. Just make sure that you are logged on to your YouTube account so that you can type your questions into the chat box on the right of the YouTube screen. And Xiaoqin, who is today's producer and chat box moderator, will relay them to me to read out. Okay, so Eden, what will you be reading for us today?
I will be reading from my upcoming Southern Gothic fantasy novella, which is called Psychopomp and Circumstance. It comes out October 21st from Tor.com Publishing. It is a coming-of-age story, but it's a coming-of-age story for someone who is a little bit older, but who's grown up in a family of very overpowering parents who haven't allowed them to do much in life, and they finally take a stand to do something that they think is right. And it's without parental support. It's without parental guidance. It's without parental financial help. And it is a journey that our main character, Fee, takes to do what's right, to plan the funeral for her aunt.
All right, cool. Take it away.
So I'm going to start at the beginning. Chapter 1. Her final cotillion was in full swing, and Phaedra St. Margaret was vexed. Oh, not because of the event itself. That was lovely. The location was stunning. A grand ballroom on the top floor of one of New Charleston's mansions. Windows thrown wide, overlooking the harbor. The Brockingtons had spared no expense this night, going so far as to hire a smattering of dark-cloaked conjurers. While Fee was not usually partial to magic, finding the excessive ceremony expended to craft such moments exhausting to observe, it did not rankle her here. The conjurers nestled in one corner of the room, blending in with the shadows as they whispered and gestured dramatically, creating the hovering spheres of light that illuminated and enhanced the varying shades of brown of the revelers in attendance. A lion-footed table stood at the far end of the ballroom, laden with food in glittering crystal bowls, the punch inside seeping a cooling fog that drew the overheated dancers from the polished hardwood floor to sip the fruity, boozy nectar like silk-draped hummingbirds. It was a sight to behold. No, Phaedra's feathers were ruffled because she was here at all. Her mother's doing, of course. She was of age and unmarried, so this was her duty as a daughter of the Reconstruction. Find a suitable husband, have children, and raise them to carry on the family name and its legacy of enriching the city with wealth and knowledge. The war had ended, and she was looking forward to the Juneteenth celebrations again this year to commemorate the end of enslavement for her brethren and sistren. But this dolling up in dresses she would never wear again, and torturing her hair into a dress showpiece more suitable as a topping for a cake than a hairstyle, was for the birds. With the edge of her closed fan, Fee flicked aside one of the hovering spheres of light and proceeded deeper into the ballroom. Thankfully, this was the final year she would have to bother with this excessive ceremony. The arrangement she'd made with her mother was that she would attend each cotillion, making an effort to smile and dance and chatter amiably until she turned 21. By then, she would either be married or resign to consider suitors below her station, as she would no longer be in the ingenue category, or, to her mother's unending horror, find work. That was just fine with Fee. She would rather work at her father's distillery than pander to the tender sensibilities of the men who frequented these balls, while succinctly yet modestly enumerating the qualities she possessed that would make her an appropriate life mate. She had done so every year since she was of age, aside from the few years the war had prevented such events, and she was tired to her very marrow of it. Just inside the ballroom, Fee nodded at an acquaintance she recognized from an earlier dance and complimented the girl on her dress, receiving one in turn. While she gracefully accepted the kind words, Fee knew the peach-hued silk favored her dark skin and the lace detailing sat perfectly on her shoulders. For all her division with her overbearing mother, she had to admit the woman had good taste and was always aware of the current style. It was her own mother who had taken notice there was no need for the women in their family to wear the cumbersome bustles beneath their gown to add fullness when their own natural anatomy provided the same silhouette without the padded undergarment. The weather was too hot for all that extra anyway. Soon other women with nature's endowment followed suit. Fee swept deeper into the room, her fan clutched in one hand while she made a beeline for the refreshments table. She'd feel better with a drink in the other hand. As was usual, the refreshment table was crowded. While she waited her turn, absently fanning her face and neck, Fee caught a snip of stage-whispered conversation between two older women as they left the table with their drinks. "How long has it been?" "Oh, I don't know, some 5 odd years." "Can you imagine? And she was from such a good family. Her niece is supposed to be here tonight. She's 21 already and still can't secure herself a husband? What grown woman can't manage to hold on to a man? I can't understand it. Well, what's wrong with her?" Their voices faded as they sauntered off to half-heartedly perform their chaperone duties. Fee's heart burned in her chest, and heat climbed the column of her neck. They were talking about her, of course. A footnote in the gossip about Auntie Cleo. Somehow, it was still a topic after all these years. Several more people left the table with their potables, and the line crept forward. Fee advanced as well, the flicks of her fan doing little to cool her rising irritation. Did they have nothing better to do at a party? maybe perform their assigned duties. She could see couples getting closer than was seemly and even pairing off to steal away into the darkened balconies overlooking the floating gardens, heady with the perfume of full moon blooming brugmansia. Maybe Papa should accept that invitation to join the Freedman's Bureau. Having a position like that, in addition to his own business, would elevate his standing in the community more and lessen the sniping about her aunt. She let out a weary sigh. No, in truth it wouldn't. Even her own family sniped about Auntie Cleo. Why wouldn't the rest of New Charleston? When Fee glanced over at the chaperone table, the women were still in conversation. They tittered, heads together like lock-horned rams. She was desperate to know the rest of the vitriol they spat. This was her final season, and Fee wouldn't have to endure these parties any longer, so she could say her piece to the nosy Nellies before she and her skirts went scooping out the doors for the final time. Her fan hid the scoff that erupted from her lips. If she did tell those women about themselves, the news of her actions would spread like wildfire. Speaking so boldly could easily garner a visit from a doctor to see what was wrong with her mind that would cause her to take leave of it, especially a gently bred society woman like herself, who should know better. Someone would send a winged messenger the instant she turned on her heel to leave, and not having to travel on the constantly flooded roads, the creature would reach the asylum long before her carriage could return to Rosemount. Having her sanity brought into question was enough to put her off the idea. If she managed to avoid the institutions, she'd have to write a plethora of apology notes to the Brockingtons and their guests in order to show her face in town again. No one wanted that. She blew out a breath and flexed her feet in the shoes that were just snug enough to keep a body alert with discomfort. The music changed from a jaunty, quick-tempo song to a more languorous one as Fee reached the refreshments and plucked up one of the punch cups. The mist on its surface chilled her as she sipped, thinking how to approach the matter with the scandalmongers, when a voice spoke to her. "Why, Phaedra, you've come. I told Mother you would." Suppressing her irritation, she smiled at the speaker. "Desmond, yes, I have." "I trust you are well." "Thank you. I am. I hope you are." To no one's surprise, Desmond's suite fell into step with Fee as she walked away from the refreshments table. He had asked around about her, she knew, but so far she had managed to avoid dancing with him at these soirees. While outwardly mannered, he was said to be a cruel tyrant if one challenged his whims. Only a few long-suffering individuals remained in his employ. Despite his attempts, he had not managed to secure a suitable marriage with a woman of his choosing. Of the 2 engagements he'd attempted, one young woman had quickly thereafter married another man, and the other young woman's father spirited her away in the middle of the night to parts unknown and had never returned to the city. Fee had been distracted with her thoughts and had allowed him to catch her unaware. "I think it's high time we've had a dance, don't you?" Timing could not have been more against her. "No, I don't think—" She tried to move around him, but he was having none of it. He seized her wrist in an iron grip, and in her shock, Fee released the crystal cup, watching horrified as it fell to the floor and shattered into a million rice-sized grains. While the revelers on the dance floor and those near the musicians did not hear, the group gathered around the refreshments table paused in their own conversations to look at what had caused the faux pas. "You are ruining my glove," Fee hissed at Desmond's face as she tried to tug her wrist free, bewildered now that eyes were on them. The threat of her property ruined had no effect on him. "Soon I will join my father's medical practice. I can buy you more." "No, thank you. I have more than enough pears." When her words did not garner the freedom or the intervention of any so-called chaperones, she gritted her teeth. "Fine, then we will dance." "I think," he said as Fee marched them toward the dance floor, "that I am supposed to lead." "Lead me over there, then." Fee indicated the chaperones with a nod of her head. Smug satisfaction crept over his face as he took her fan hand in his. The other he pressed to her waist. Instead of the acceptable light touch, his hand lay heavily on her person, and Fee shifted her hip to inform him. He acknowledged her discomfort with an unrepentant grin. The desire to miss a step, just to stomp on his foot, welled up inside her, threatening to spill over. As they moved through the dance, Fee caught portions of the women's conversation, and her suspicions were confirmed. Her aunt didn't deserve to be the brunt of such gossip after what Fee knew was closer to 10 years. 10 years, mercy. When was the last time she'd heard from Auntie Cleo? They corresponded via letter fairly often, especially now that she was of age and her mother no longer intercepted her post. But for the life of her, she couldn't recall the most recent letter. How long had it been? Fee needed to visit her aunt. As a girl, she'd promised herself she would take time to call in person as soon as she was out from under her mother's purview. But now she was 1 in 20 and she still hadn't kept that promise. What had prevented her? Too much of her time spent dodging her mother's wishes and extricating herself from the detailed plans her mother had for her only child's life, while simultaneously making her own plans to push against the unflagging side of her mother's will, subtly enough to where her actions wouldn't bring down harsh consequences. And where had all that effort gotten her? She looked into Desmond's reptilian face. He held her too tightly still, and inside her gloves her hands felt trapped, slick with perspiration. The song ended and she stepped back, applauding the excellent music. When Desmond reached for her again, Fee rapped him smartly on his knuckles with the edge of her closed fan. Before he could recover, she marched away to speak to the Brockingtons and thank them for their generous hospitality. Tomorrow, she promised herself. Nothing would prevent her from making arrangements to visit her aunt, no matter what her mother thought of the black sheep of their family.
Thanks, Eden. That was great. And such an interesting look at a restricting society and life that Fee leads.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hopefully we can all get see whether she manages to escape it when the book comes out. So I'm going to go straight into the questions. Your books feature plenty of fantastic female characters, from the young, Jazz, Del, Ava, and adults. Young adults like Fee, and Nana Rose, Janie, the grandmas, even the women in your various short stories. They are all complex characters with agency, or trying to find their agency, and they are very human and sometimes flawed. What or who are your inspirations for your female characters?
I have a lot of inspirations for my female characters because I grew up around such phenomenal women. Not only my mother, my grandmother's sisters, and I had a lot of family friends. My mother's sisters, everyone was very vibrant, very intriguing with how they saw the world a little bit differently. My mother was the youngest of 3 daughters, and it was almost like she had secondary mothers in her sisters because they were 10 and 12 years older than she was. So they already had an adult outlook on life almost by the time she came along enough to remember their conversations and their influence. I also grew up in a very close-knit family where people would come over for meals and dinners, or just to sort of share and catch up with stories. And it was always fascinating to see how people could interact, especially how women interact with each other, whether they agree on everything or not, how they present themselves, how they present their arguments, how you can still work together toward a common goal but still have differences of opinions. And On top of that, I'll probably add a little bit of a layer of some of my female friends who are just absolutely phenomenal people.
Yeah. So inspired by real people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on my next question, but I'm going to ask it. So many of your adult female characters are shaped by generational pressures or trauma, and sometimes they are haunted by literal and metaphorical ghosts, like in your short story anthology, Spooklights. But they show courage and they strive to rise above. And your work often features very powerful elder women who act as cultural keepers and protectors. What inspired you to center these types of women as spiritual and emotional anchors, especially when exploring themes of trauma and resilience?
I grew up in a Gullah Geechee culture, and growing up in a very isolated community, um, you are surrounded by a lot of culture keepers, and you're surrounded by a lot of, or at least I was surrounded by, a lot of women who not only tell stories and tell their own history, they have folkloric ways of giving you information, of warning you, of giving you guidance without it feeling like they're telling you what to do. They have lots of ways of gently showing and telling you their experiences and giving you the benefit of their wisdom without making it feel like they're forcing you down a certain path. And I think it's important to feature older characters in work in a way that isn't dismissive, because we have such libraries of knowledge and information in some of our elders, and a lot of them weren't able to tell their stories the way that people can now using internet and lots of camera work and lots of ways of preserving their experiences now. And there is a book, and I think it's also a website and an Instagram channel called Crack Teeth, which is the Gullah way of saying speak. And the woman that runs it makes a point to talk with elders in the community, asking questions, recording their stories, recording their responses, and memorializing them in her book. Because once that generation of people are no more, all of the knowledge that they had is gone. And it's such a potent thing now because a lot of people are worried about the state of the world and how are we going to survive what's going on in the world now. And a lot of these older people, a lot of these elders have experienced similar living conditions. And instead of trying to have to reinvent the wheel, it might be a positive thing to ask them, how did you survive? How did you endure? How did you live? It's one of the sayings that the Gullah people have is that we find a way when there is no way. And I think that's a very potent thing that I keep in mind when I'm crafting a story and working through a story and in my own life.
Yeah. We were talking earlier before we went live about the wisdom that these elder people in the stories impart, and then the young upstart doesn't listen, and then they have to go and solve the problems by themselves. But yeah. Okay, so speaking of powerful characters, your female characters are resilient in their individual ways as they face down difficult situations. Some readers might find them unlikable. So do you ever feel pressured by gender and cultural stereotypes to make your female characters likable or relatable? And have you ever got any flack for not making a female character likable enough?
I do not go into story writing with the intention to make characters likable or relatable. I just go in with the idea of this is a situation that probably someone else in the world has found themselves in, and I go from there. I don't sit there and go, well, I really want to make her likable. I really want to make her relatable. or try and give her personality traits to make her that way. I also don't go the opposite direction and try and make her unlikable. I think that we as individuals are different enough and complex enough that those nuances come about anyway within a character. I think that one of the things I do, consciously or not, try to incorporate is I try to incorporate soft girls, because I think there is this mentality that soft girls can't carry a story.
Yeah.
And there's this idea that soft girls are always passive. Soft girls don't get angry, or soft girls don't have differing opinions, or soft girls can't be girls of action. And I don't think that's true. They may take action differently, but it's still making a decision to do something. So they're not necessarily passive, but they may just absolutely up and walk away from a situation, possibly getting themselves into another situation. But I think one of the things that is important to me is to make sure that all of my characters feel like they have a depth to them, and that they have a story that may not always make it onto the page, but they feel like characters that have had history and have had experiences.
Yeah. Okay. So your stories definitely pass the Bechdel test with their depiction of complex and interesting relationships between women and girls. Why do you think some YA authors still have trouble writing stories that pass the Bechdel test, despite the fact that YA is a female-dominated category, and there are many more things that girls talk about other than boys?
I think that I'm going to try and answer that from a publishing standpoint, first of all, and then I can come back and answer that from maybe a social aspect. I think that a lot of YA books center those, don't pass the test because they are following a model. And a lot of times publishing is that sort of industry where they want variations on a theme. They don't want it too different and too out of the way, because then they'll worry about, how am I going to sell this? How am I going to market this? Where would I put this on either a physical bookshelf or a virtual bookshelf? Where does it fit among everything else that's already been published? So a lot of times, not pushing against what publishing already believes is a valid story or a valid trope or a valid plot line. People have a tendency to go, they are publishing this type of book right now, so I want to write this type of book so that I have a better chance of getting published. And it's an absolutely valid way of looking at it, because it's one of the reasons that when you go to submit a book to an agent or an editor, you give valid, or what you think are valid, comps. What are other books that your book is like? So that we have an understanding of how we should read this book. Where is it going to sit with other published books right now? So I think from a publishing standpoint, people want their book out there. They want their work to be seen and read by others. So they're basically following the publishing industry's lead with that in a lot of ways. From a social aspect, I think that there's probably, I saw a post, and I don't remember which social media it was on, but the person said something along the lines of, how can I write a plot that isn't about, a love triangle? What else is there? What else is there to add excitement or drama to a story? And I didn't respond to it, as I usually don't respond to things. I usually sort of note it and go, and and move on with what I'm doing. But I sincerely hope that someone took it upon themselves, or several someones took it upon themselves to say, there's a wide open world of plots and possibilities for you to write your stories about. It doesn't have to be a love triangle. Opening up your imagination, watching different movies, reading different books than you usually read can help you go, well, what else is there?
Yeah.
What else can I write about? And there's a number of things that you can write about. If you like writing love triangles, there's nothing wrong with that. But to say that there's nothing else that can be written about it is certainly not true. And there's a way to add in different elements to your story and keep a little romantic aspect if you'd like, but just know that there's more things that you can write about that are still interesting, that are still intriguing, that are still riveting to the reader without just that one particular storyline.
Yeah. Thanks. Those are two very interesting answers. I have a follow-up. What can you suggest for writers who want to write female conversations and relationships realistically?
Well, first I would ask if they are having interesting conversations themselves, and do you have friends or family members, or are you belonging to groups on social media or in-person groups where you're able to have conversations? If you aren't, I would say try to either recall some great conversations that you've had, join some groups that are about a topic that you happen to be interested in, whatever that is, whether it's a film or a certain TV show, or if it's about crafting or something along those lines, something that you happen to have some sort of interest in, wine tasting, or maybe you want to start gardening or growing your own food, or whatever the case may be. Join a group where you can have, or at least see other people having conversations about other topics. One of the things that I think is incredibly helpful with crafting not only believable conversations between women, is to look at it generationally. Imagine someone who's 16 talking with someone who's 36 or 56 or 76. How would you put them in conversation? How would they interact depending on the stage of life that they're in or the experiences that they're in? And try imagining maybe the same scenario of women at different ages in their life and see how the conversation would present itself differently. One of the other things I've seen recently, because I apparently am just, an avid consumer of these online videos of people talking about what they believe people's lives are like online. And it was a video saying that it was a 50-year-old woman, and it was one of those AI-generated things that I saw in passing.
Right.
And the image that they had of the woman that was supposed to be 50, she was decrepit. I just thought, are you sure she's not 150? What is this image that you have of this 50-year-old woman? And I said, I'm past 50, and I certainly am not this. And there's this idea, I think, that people who are 40 look a certain way, or 50 or 60. And there's this idea that these people are incredibly ancient.
Yeah.
And maybe if you only know people that are your age group, try and expand that a little bit and meet and learn about people that are of different ages, because the person that put this video together clearly was not aware
What a 50-year-old woman looks like.
Be 50 years old. I mean, it didn't mean that you're about to crumble into dust any moment. So just being able to realistically portray people. There are lots of accounts that I see on social media now with people who are embracing their age. They are embracing silver hair. They are embracing the fact that they're in their 50s or 60s and they've gotten a certain amount of confidence with how they portray themselves to the world, whether it's in what they wear or in what they say or whatever it is, how they're traveling through the world. So looking at some of those accounts, if you don't know anyone in your life that's like that, but you want to portray someone who's like that, look at those videos. They're happy to share what their lifestyle is like, how they make decisions on moving through the world, getting dressed, dealing with, am I going to restrain my hair today? Am I not? Am I going to wear makeup? Am I not? So the information is out there for you to find if you want to portray people of varying ages in authentic, realistic ways.
Okay, that's good advice. We have some questions from the audience. I'm going to put one up right now from Cassie Williams. So Cassie asks, what advantages and maybe disadvantages do horror and fantasy as genres have for telling stories about complex intergenerational relationships and histories?
I love this question. Thank you, Cassie. I'm going to say that there are a lot of advantages. I'll probably have to think a little bit harder about disadvantages. But horror and fantasy as genres not only give you flexibility to talk openly about the ways that people interact intergenerationally, and it helps the writer in a way that they may feel hesitant to do if they were just writing literary fiction or writing memoir, because you can couch things in a way that you say, soften the blow sometimes when you're trying to write. Because a lot of us writers, we're writing to sometimes resolve situations that we've dealt with in our lives that were difficult, or that we have friends or family members, or sometimes it's even a TV show that we watched that we just went, no, the writers treated this character horribly. I want to write something to fix it. So being able to write horror and fantasy in a way that you can manipulate the world around the characters so that you're creating your own world so that you can more authentically have the characters interact so that you don't feel like setting it in the real world, quote unquote, would make it harder for you as a writer to deal with your own emotions while writing it. You can say, this is fantasy, this is horror, this is a speculative thing that I'm writing. I don't have to be beholden to the rules of what the regular world is doing, but I can let that fall away and deal with the real emotions of these two characters, whether they be human or not, and deal with those emotions and viewpoints more in depth. I hope that answers your question, Cassie. As far as disadvantages, the only thing I can think of, and this is not a disadvantage for a writer, I can only see pretty much upsides for writers. The only disadvantage, I think, is probably from the reader point of view, with a reader sometimes not being able to parse, this is a situation that's dealing with a real life problem, and being able to pick that problem and situation up out of your fantasy or horror world and apply it to their real life situation. Because a lot of times the ability for the writer to do that is there. It's just sometimes on the reader point of view, they may not be able to pull that out of a fantasy world and see how it applies to a real life situation. But that isn't something that the writer has to be concerned about, I don't think.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And actually, Cassie says, it's incredible. Thank you, Eden. Thank you for your question, Cassie. I'm going to go back to one of my questions. So we've been talking about women. Let's talk about men. Though there are some misogynistic characters in your books, I mean, we just saw Desmond from the excerpt you read, who is very slimy. There are male and female relationships between main characters that are equitable, and some of your male characters are respectful of women and their thoughts and their decisions. Do you think reframing how stories describe men away from hostile and toxic stereotypes and towards complexity and even vulnerability can be one of the ways that SFF writers can break away from tropes that promote toxic masculinity and the dehumanization of women?
I absolutely think so. In my middle grade novels, it is, which middle grade, for those that aren't aware, is fiction typically written for 8 to 12-year-old readers. It is their first introduction usually to chapter books and reading a little bit longer. So this is my opportunity to plug my donations as well. These are my middle grade novels, and especially in Root Magic, there is a brother and sister relationship for the 11-year-olds on the cover, who are twins, but also their mother and their uncle. Their relationship is portrayed in the book as well. And the way that their uncle and their mother interact is one of the things I wanted to focus on in the book. The uncle is very respectful of the mother's differing opinion on teaching her children root work, which is their ancestral folkloric magic. And he wants to teach them. Their mother doesn't want them taught. And he doesn't do it behind her back. He tries to talk to her about it. They're looking at the challenges that are happening in the world around them. They're looking at schools being integrated. They're looking at a lot of changes in civil rights and marches and movements. And he's trying to convince his sister that this is an important thing for her kids to learn. And he's willing to do it and teach them in a way that she's comfortable with. And he respects her enough to say, this needs to be your decision, but I will absolutely abide by what you decide for your children. And I really wanted to highlight and sort of almost bookend the relationships between both sets of siblings, our two main characters and the mother and uncle. In the CREEPENING, which this is the hardback, this is part of the giveaway that I'll be doing. The paperback for this, which is a little bit cheaper, comes out next month. Roddy, who's pictured here on the cover, has to go and live with his aunt and uncle after his mother passes away in an accident. And they've been estranged from the family. So this is his first time that he remembers meeting them, even though she remembers him from being a baby. And it's the first time he's meeting her new husband. And it was very important for me to portray his aunt's husband as a super good, upstanding guy. He is always willing to help, but he realizes that Roddy is a kid that's got some grieving to do. And he wants to be there for both his new wife and this kid that they've now brought on board. But he is at a point where he knows he doesn't have the same experiences that this family does, but he's committed to being that rock and that secure space for both of them. So there's different sections where, and they're fixing up this house here, which is why it starts out as creepy. Gets a little bit worse before it gets better. But he is willing to take Roddy and teach him things, giving his wife some time on her own. He does the same thing for his wife and says, we trust you to clean up this room or clean up this section of the house while we do something else. And he positions himself throughout the story as, if you need me, I'm here and I'm going to support, but I am not going to force my opinion on anybody. But if you need me, or if you ask for my opinion, which Roddy does at one point, I will give it to you. And one of my favorite parts of the story is Roddy learns about an ancestral practice called hair burning in the story that his aunt tells him about. And Roddy is weirded out about it. And he goes to his uncle and says, "What is this? Isn't this weird that my aunt wants to teach me how to do this?" And his uncle says, "I didn't have anybody in my family that did it, but if she came to me and said, 'This is important to me, I would like your help,' or 'I would like you to do this. It makes me feel secure. It makes me feel safe,' he said, I would do it because I always want her to feel that way. And if there's anything I can do to help her feel that way, I'll do it." And it's a turning point in the story for Roddy to see this big burly guy go, if it's something that I can do to help her feel safe and happy, it's a small thing for me. Whether I believe it or not, I would do it for her.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I wanted to get across in that novel.
Yeah. I like how these characters are supportive without being pushy, and I think they're really good examples for children, especially these are children's books, and I think they're really good examples of what a good man could be or should be, should look like.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'm gonna go into another audience question. We're getting a few. Okay. So, the Full Moon Folklorist, which is a really cool name, asks, what words of wisdom do you have for Black speculative fiction authors who want to get published traditionally?
I will say thank you, Full Moon Folklorist. I recognize that account name. So thank you for showing up and for coming and for your question. I have lots of words of wisdom, and I rarely get asked for my words of wisdom, so thank you. Write the story that you want to write without censoring yourself. You will find plenty of censorship that approaches you as you move through traditional publishing. So when you're writing your story, you need to be as confident and secure in those early drafts as you possibly can, recognizing possibly that later on in the process, this might be something that someone says, "Is this accurately spelled? Do you want to use dialogue here? This seems like an unusual way for a character to respond." So you need to be as secure in your story as you possibly can so that you can go back to that person and say, "This absolutely needs this dialogue here. This is absolutely the way this person from this part of the world with this experience would respond in this situation." And be able to express that confidence in a way that says, I am fully aware of what this means in the story, and I'm going to stet this section, meaning leave it as it is. I'm absolutely fine with it the way that it is. I found with traditional publishing, because most of the people you find that you work with in traditional publishing have never been to the part of the world that you're writing about. And yet they're the person that is making this decision on your book. So you have to find a way to be able to work with someone that might have an either incorrect or outdated view of the part of the world that you're writing about, and be able to respond in a way that's professional to say, I get what you're saying, but this is absolutely accurate for these people that I'm writing about. This is absolutely what they would say. This is absolutely what they would do. And just keep in the back of your mind that it's because they don't have the knowledge that you do. And you are the expert on the place and the people and the events that you're writing about in your work.
That's
Hopefully
good.
that answers your question.
All right, so since we're talking about writing, let's continue that conversation. Stories are one of the most powerful ways of bringing about cultural change. Now, many YA and fantasy stories and books feature some sort of violence, and sometimes violence against women. How do you use horror and Southern Gothic elements to speak to the lived experiences of women surviving violence?
One thing I want to say to preface my response is a lot of people think horror is outright gory, bloody violence. And yes, it can be that, but a lot of times when people write horror, it's something that is couched as, quote, quiet horror. But there's this idea that unless there's blood and guts flying everywhere, it's not horror. And that isn't the case. And there are a lot more people writing quiet horror, writing Gothic, writing Southern Gothic, that shows the experiences and lived experiences of people, particularly women and girls, and helping to further the knowledge that treating women in this way is traumatic, is abusive, is horrific. Just because there isn't, a masked man chasing you through a campground with a machete, that doesn't necessarily speak to the end all of horror. So I wanted to say that first of all. Second of all, I think that there's a lot of work being done in the horror space that is putting women and girls as the central character without making them only the victims. There is a lot of horror and dark fiction and fantasy being written that shows that women have a voice and they have the ability to make change in their world. But I also feel like one of the things that's important to do and to realize if you're a writer or a filmmaker or you're making some sort of consumable media is it's important to find someone that you trust to read your work. Not everyone is good at giving feedback. Not everyone is trained in the right way of doing that. But it's important to find someone that you can stick with to say, this is my idea of how I have portrayed these characters. Have I missed something? Have I not gotten it correct? And looking at trauma, looking at abusive situations, there's a lot more awareness, I think, about it now. But I think one of the important things that is happening in the world right now is there's a movement away from being too self-sacrificing for others. And this movement towards you as an individual are also important. Your comfort, your peace, your space. There's a lot less centering men and centering what men want from women. And I think that it's important for us to move away from you aren't worthy if you don't have a man. You aren't worthy if you don't have children. You aren't worthy if you aren't sacrificing for someone else. And I think that there is a movement away from self-martyrdom for women. And I think that's being reflected and should be reflected in more media going forward. Because socially, a lot of us are conditioned to do more for other people than we are for ourselves and to sacrifice ourselves more. And we should be up and we should be doing this and we should be hustling. We should be working hard, burning the candle at both ends. If you weren't ready to collapse at any moment, you weren't working hard enough. And I think it's important to note that even as a writer, there are times where you're writing where it might look like you're staring out of the window, but you're working through something in your head and you're sorting something out and you're trying to figure out how those pieces of the story are going to fit together. So also, if you see someone doing that, if you happen to have a writer or a creative in your life, that may be what they're doing, even if they look like they're staring off into space. That's still part of the writing and creative process.
Okay. Thanks. That was a very interesting perspective. I'm going to ask you a question about geek culture. So
Okay.
Geek culture in general, including science fiction and fantasy, has had its share of critics saying that it's still very male-dominated, though there are a rising number of prominent, well-respected, and well-known female authors. Plus, there are still plenty of hostile, misogynist, and sexist behavior by male geeks towards female geeks. What do you think needs to be done to make geek culture as a whole, whether it's comics, gaming, books, even cons, more welcoming for women and girls?
Coming from a geek person myself, I have played D&D for years. I have played video games for years. I have been in those spaces where I did not feel comfortable. I have been in those spaces where I could tell that someone is, through their character, trying to make a point to me about something, or they, through their character, are saying something unacceptable, couching it as, oh, I wouldn't say that, but you know, this is role play. I've also had situations where someone has said, I want to test your geekness.
Right.
Name this many of whatever. And I would like us to move away from testing each other on how geeky the other person is, you know, to allow them into spaces. I think it's absolutely okay to have an interest in something that isn't going back to the absolute beginning of the franchise or the particular campaign. I think it's fine to enter a fandom at any point. One of the things I think is important that I have seen some cons do, they have a way to report when someone is uncomfortable. Finding people that are willing and able to address things, not putting the person who feels uncomfortable in a position of having to feel even worse, having to confront the person that they're uncomfortable around. I personally loved a lot of online cons that happened during COVID, and it was a way for people to interact and talk and chat and share in the privacy and comfort of their own homes. One place that did a very good job of that, I think for 2 or 3 years, was FIA Literary Magazine of Black Speculative Fiction put on FIACon for a couple of years. And I know that it was a lot of work and a lot of people and a lot of moving parts. But it was such an incredible experience. And people are still talking about how wonderful that particular con was. I think part of the thing that is going to be harder to do, because a lot of times people feel like it's a protected space and there needs to be gatekeeping, or people sometimes feel like, I've been in this fandom for a long time and you're now just coming into this fandom, your thoughts and opinions aren't as important as someone who's been a long time fan. And I think it's perfectly okay to enter at any point, but if there was more of a, I hesitate to use the word mentorship because I don't mean that specifically, but if there was a way of sort of recommending to people that are new to fandoms, oh, you've come into it as of 2025 or 2023. Maybe you would like this episode from 2020 or 2010 that seems to fit or is in response to the new season that you're watching. If there was a way of just sort of helping people along, and on the opposite side of that, people showing that they want to be helped along, because not everyone is going to feel comfortable giving suggestions if they don't feel like they're going to be welcomed in doing so. So ask people, I've just found this show and I love it. I know it's been ages, but is there anybody around that has watched all these episodes? Can you tell me where to start? I like this. Can you recommend this to me? And being open on both sides, I think, would go a long way. I hope that answers the question that I was asked.
Yeah, I think so. I think it does. And I just want to put a comment up by the Full Moon Softars who said, I appreciate you saying that about geek culture and that it's okay to love a franchise as a fan regardless of when one begins to enjoy it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's always a lot of, I'm sorry, I think my chair is like
Thinking?
So, there we go. I was like, wait a second. I feel like I'm a lot lower than I was like 2 seconds ago. When you look at long-standing fandoms, one of the ones that pops immediately to mind is Doctor Who, which started in the 60s. And there are a lot of people that entered at the first David Tennant stage. There are a lot of people that entered at the Ncuti Gatwa stage. So, there's so much folklore and there's so much lore with Doctor Who. Maybe somebody that's just entered would love to know about the Vincent van Gogh episode, which is such a powerful episode. Maybe people would want to be directed to, certain things that stick with them as a franchise. When there's reboots that come out, instead of just going, well, it's never going to be better than this one, just maybe make a suggestion on why you love the original or why you love this particular version of it. Because couching it like that tends to make people a little bit more receptive.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go to our last question because we have been talking for about an hour, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you've been so very incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against women work as a whole. I'm going to ask you a bit of a obvious question here, but we ask all the authors we have on this question. Why do you support the cause to end violence against women?
Oh, I have seen and heard so many women and girls that have been absolutely destroyed by violence, the threat of violence. It's not something that destroys individuals only. It destroys relationships, it destroys families. As is evident in a lot of my writing, trauma is generational. It moves from family to family. It moves through the generations and becomes deeply embedded. And it's not a small thing for violence to happen and think, oh, it was one incident and it's over. It leaves scars. It leaves lingering effects. It leaves trenches through individuals and through societies. And I support it because it's something that is absolutely destructive to our community at large, to the world at large. And if we're able to find a way to resolve differences in a way that doesn't involve violence or fists or any of that, it's a way to heal deeply embedded wounds and grow together as a society and grow together as a people that can stand and learn how to disagree without destroying.
That's a great answer. So, final question. What do you think authors can do to help with the cultural change needed to eradicate violence against women and girls?
I think there's a lot authors can do. One of the hardest things I think authors should do and can do is to push back against what publishing tells them to do, which is sometimes write within a certain template. And there needs to be a pushback on publishing to say, I've written something different. I've written something that addresses issues in my community that doesn't fall into toxicity, that doesn't fall into existing tropes, and push back on publishing as a whole to say we don't need too many variations on a theme, or if we do have a variation on a theme, this is why this idea is new and different and approaches what you have put out in years past in a different way. Standing up for what you've written. I know that I've had to have a lot of fights and discussions with editors about why I don't want to change something in one of my books. Specifically Root Magic, I was told early on in the process that, yes, we want to publish your book, but we need you to take all the dialect out because we don't publish dialect, especially not for that age group. And I was worried about that because this was my debut novel. This was what I had worked so hard and so long for. And now you're telling me that a crucial part of the book you want me to just remove. And looking at a way to push back against those things and against those decisions is something that we as authors should do. Joining coalitions and joining groups so that you can push back in mass and push back as one voice against things. There are a variety of different writers groups and writers guilds that help push back against trends and poor behavior in the industry so that you can arm yourself with knowledge ahead of time, but also if something does go wrong, be able to push back against it. You can share what you're willing to share on your social medias. You can mentor someone else to help them feel more confident as an author, to feel more confident in their voice, in their story, in the fact that what they have to say and how they want to say it is absolutely valid. And learning that one of the things that we have as creators, not just authors, is the ability to morph and change what we're writing and what our work is, and supporting each other in whatever we want that new field or that new genre that we want to write in or that new media that we want to tackle is absolutely something that keeps us fresh and new and keeps us in a point and in a place to be able to help others through things. And just being able to write about things, giving people something to read so that they don't feel alone in the situation that they're in, and giving them almost a feeling of, I can do this. This character was able to extricate themselves from the situation, so I can do the same. And sometimes people just need to know that it's possible, and we as authors can give them that.
Great. Thanks for that really great answer. Okay, that actually brings us to the end of the session. So I'm gonna put myself back on. Hi everyone. So thank you so much, Eden, for sharing your great answers and your perspective with us. And thank you to the audience who asked questions. I'm really sorry if we couldn't get to all the questions. Just we ran out of time, but you can always come back and watch the stream again later. And Eden really gave some really interesting insights and perspectives, so she might have actually answered all your questions. So in case you missed it, I'm going to tell you all about the amazing exclusive goodies that Eden has donated to us that you can get your hands on. We have them all up on our Rally Up fundraising page, so I'm going to tell you what they are again. Goodie number one, the Eden Royce Magical Middle Grade Book Bundle, which is a really special bundle of signed and personalized first edition hardcovers from Eden's personal stash, and these are the books that she shared just now: Root Magic, Conjure Island, and The Creepening of Dogwood House. And goodie number two is Psychopomp and Circumstance bundle, which is a really amazing bundle comprising of a signed and personalized advanced review copy, an arc of Psychopomp and Circumstance, which is not out yet, and one personalized handwritten letter from the main character Fee, which can be scented and sealed with wax if requested. Now, there are plenty more author goodies available from authors including Ai Jiang, Katrina Ward, Cindy O'Quinn, Chloe Gong, Kirsten White, Mimi Matthews, Premi Mohammed, Stephanie Rutovich, and we have books from Penguin Random House and Entangled Books. New goodies are going to be released every week throughout September. We've raised $3,735 towards our $5,000 goal so far, so please do keep giving generously before the fundraiser ends in October 2025. All funds go towards Pixel Project's work to end violence against women. I'm going to share a little slide here. There you go. So all the goodies are up on our Rally Up fundraising page. That's the link, and the link is also going up in the chat box. So if you haven't already done it, go and click through and find all the goodies you like. If you want to know more about Read for Pixels and the other authors we have coming up and the previous authors whose YouTube videos you can watch, go to our Read for Pixels page. So the link for that is also going up in our chat box. And if you are interested in some feminist horror poetry, you might want to get your hands on a copy of our award-winning Under Her Eye poetry collection that's published in partnership with Black Spot Books. You can either get the paperback or ebook edition from all major booksellers worldwide. The collection comprises poems from 112 acclaimed female and non-binary poets, opening with Know to Be True by Bram Stoker Award winner Stephanie M. Rutovich and The Writing Assignment by HWA Lifetime Achievement Award winner and SFPA Grandmaster herself, Marge Simon, and closes on a powerful note with A Map of the Backyard by Bram Stoker Award nominee Jessica Mayhew. Net proceeds from Under Her Eye go towards the Pixel Project's anti-violence against women work. And finally, if you want to learn more about violence against women, what you can do about it, how you can help, please go to our website, www.pixelproject.net. We have lots of information and resources and links. If you're looking for helplines and resources, go to nomoredirectory.org. They have a searchable database for almost every country in the world. And the links for all of that are also in the chat box. All right, so that actually brings us, yes, Eden, you have an announcement. I mean, you mentioned it before, but you have something to say about your new books.
Yes, very quickly, before we finish up, Psychopomp and Circumstance that I read from today is coming out on October 21st from Tor.com. It will be coming out in a hardcover. It will be coming out in an ebook as well. And another book that I mentioned on this call is The Creepening of Dogwood House, which is coming out in paperback. The hardcover, which is the first edition, is in the giveaway, but the paperback, which is a little bit cheaper, is coming out also in October. I'm going to have a busy month next month. So get either of these, Creepening for middle grade readers, or those of you that just are adults but love a little bit of a creepy haunted house, and Psychopomp and Circumstance, which is an adult read. But if you happen to have a super advanced reader who's young, there's nothing in here that's certainly untoward. But again, a little bit Southern Gothic, a little bit creepy, historical, set in 1865. Don't quote me. I don't remember. My brain is a sieve right now. But both of these are coming out in October, and you can grab them, paperback for Creepening and hardcover or ebook for Psychopomp and Circumstance.
and just in time for Halloween as well. So great.
Yes, just in time to cozy up and read something.
Yeah. All right, so that's the end. Thank you so much again, Eden, for being with us, and thank you everyone for attending and asking your questions. And hopefully we'll see you next time. It's good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world, and goodbye.
Thank you.